But Catalonia isn't alone. Across the globe, regions are fighting for recognition with varying degrees of success. From the frozen conflict zones of Eastern Europe to the constitutional debates of the United Kingdom, separatist movements reflect both universal principles and highly specific local conditions. What drives these movements beyond the headlines? And why do some succeed while others fail? To understand these questions, we need to examine the fundamental forces driving separation movements worldwide. The language of identity. How culture drives separation. Why would someone risk everything, economic stability, personal safety, even freedom, for the right to govern themselves? This question lies at the heart of understanding separatist movements worldwide. While politics and economics certainly matter, something deeper often drives these movements. Cultural identity. Cultural identity encompasses language, traditions, customs, and shared history that define how people see themselves. For many independence movements, preserving this identity becomes the fundamental motivation that sustains them through decades of struggle. When people feel their culture is threatened, the desire for political autonomy often follows as a protective measure. In Quebec, Canada's predominantly French-speaking province, the sovereignty movement has ebbed and flowed for generations. Surveys reveal that 72% of Quebec sovereigntists feel strongly attached to their province, compared to 44% of Quebec residents overall. This attachment to place and identity forms the emotional foundation for separatism that persists despite economic arguments against independence. "I speak French, I dream in French, I love in French," explains Montreal resident Marie Tremblay. "When I hear politicians in Ottawa discussing policies that affect my daily life in a language I struggle to learn in school, I feel like a foreigner in my own country." This sentiment of cultural alienation within a larger political entity appears consistently across separatist movements worldwide. Modern separatism exists within an increasingly globalized world. As borders become more permeable to commerce, ideas, and people, local identities can feel threatened. Yet simultaneously, globalization provides new platforms for preserving these identities. A Catalan language app developed in Barcelona might be downloaded by diaspora communities worldwide, strengthening cultural bonds even as physical borders remain unchanged. Language serves as the most visible marker of cultural identity and a rallying point for independence movements. In Quebec, 88% of sovereigntists believe the French language faces serious threats, compared to 59% of provincial residents overall. This perception of linguistic vulnerability translates directly into political support for greater autonomy or independence. Wales offers a parallel example, where language revival has accompanied growing nationalist sentiment. The Welsh language, which appeared on the verge of extinction in the mid-20th century with only 20% of Welsh people speaking it, has experienced a remarkable renaissance. Today, the Welsh government aims for 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, representing nearly a third of the population. This language revival coincides with the growth of Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party, which has increased its representation in the Welsh Parliament. When a language disappears, we lose an entire perspective on reality, explains linguistic anthropologist Carla Bennett. Languages contain cultural knowledge built over generations, relationships with the land, social structures, spiritual beliefs that can't simply be translated. This connection explains why so many independence movements focus on language rights as a first demand. In Catalonia, the right to education in Catalan became a major political issue decades before independence gained mainstream support. Beyond language, cultural celebrations reinforce the distinct identity underpinning separatism. The Eisteddfod in Wales, Basque Festival of As Nagusia, and Quebec's St. Jean-Baptiste Day all serve as cultural touchstones that strengthen collective identity. I once witnessed the St. Jean-Baptiste Day celebration in Montreal, where 3 generations of a family sang traditional Quebecois folk songs together, the youngest barely speaking but already absorbing the cultural heritage that might one day inform their political identity. These events transform abstract political concepts into lived experiences that engage all generations. The power of cultural identities manifests in how people describe themselves. In Quebec, 43% of sovereigntists identify as Quebecer only, rather than Canadian or some combination, versus just 17% of provincial residents overall. This exclusive identity, seeing oneself solely as a member of the minority cultural group rather than the larger state, correlates strongly with support for independence. Moving beyond Western democracies, in Myanmar, ethnic minorities like the Karen and Kachin have maintained decades-long independence struggles rooted in cultural differences from the Bama majority. Their resistance movements include extensive cultural preservation programs, from language schools to traditional arts training. Cultural identity creates powerful emotional connections to separatist causes that often override rational economic calculations. When identity feels threatened, cost-benefit analyses become secondary to concerns about cultural survival. This explains why economic arguments against independence often fail to persuade committed separatists. Their motivation stems from values that transcend financial measurements.